When people hear terms like densities and dimensions, they often imagine far-off realms or spiritual escape. But that's not what these terms are actually describing. They're describing how reality is structured, how awareness is layered, how experience is organized, and why your state of perception determines what you can sense, feel, and interact with. Dimensions aren't places you travel to, and densities aren't destinations either. They are ways consciousness focuses itself, moment by moment, to create different ways of experiencing reality. In this exploration, we'll look at what densities and dimensions really are, how they operate in everyday life, and why understanding them doesn't pull you away from this world. It changes how you perceive and navigate it, and expands your awareness of what lies beyond it. Understanding how densities and dimensions work can feel complex at first, but I'm going to simplify it. Stay with me, and by the end, you'll see how naturally it all fits together. First, let's talk about what exactly dimensions and densities are. At the most basic level, dimensions and densities describe how consciousness organizes our experiences. A dimension is a way experience is structured, created by the relationship between space, time, and perception. It defines how reality can be experienced at all. A density describes the level of awareness within that structure, how much information, sensitivity, and understanding consciousness can hold at once when it's in that structure. They work together. So let's go deeper. Dimensions are a framework of experience. In this third-dimensional reality, we're most familiar with experience is actually organized through 4 dimensions. 3 dimensions of space, length, width, and depth, and 1 dimension of time, which allows change, movement, and linear sequence. Time is what allows space to be experienced as a process rather than a frozen snapshot. Without time, there would be no motion, such as movement or action, no cause and effect, no unfolding story, just still frames. This combination of space and time creates the specific environment we call third-dimensional physical reality. So if our reality is organized through 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time, making 4 dimensions total, why isn't this called the 4th dimension? Because dimensions are named by what we directly experience, not by what makes experience possible, such as time. In everyday life, we experience space directly. We move forward and back, left and right, up and down. But time isn't experienced physically. It only shows up as the progression of change. This is called the 3rd dimension because we live in 3-dimensional space. Densities are levels of consciousness within the framework of a dimension. Consciousness expresses itself through what we call densities within a framework of a dimension. A helpful way to think about a density is as a band of vibration, similar to how one type of matter can exist as ice, water, or steam. The substance hasn't changed, only the state of it has. In the same way, a dimension provides the environment, while the density, ice, water, steam, describes the state of consciousness being experienced. According to Ra, the Law of One framework, consciousness evolves primarily through 7 densities. They describe a complete cycle known as an octave of awareness that unfolds regardless of what dimension consciousness is currently expressing itself through. Each density represents a different progression, a different progressive level of awareness, from basic awareness of existence to self-awareness, to love, understanding, and unity, and eventually reintegration with source consciousness. Each density carries more information, sensitivity, understanding, and coherence than the one before it, not because it's better, but because it's broader. Now, these 7 densities together form what's called an octave. An octave is a complete cycle of experience, and it's how reality progresses. Like the notes in a musical scale. When the cycle completes, it doesn't end, it begins again at a higher level, with greater range and complexity. Reality evolves octave by octave by refining awareness and expanding ourselves within experience. Each density also corresponds to a range of wavelengths, which is how tightly or loosely energy is organized. Lower densities have longer, slower wavelengths. Higher densities have shorter, faster, more information-rich wavelengths. As our consciousness shifts through the densities, it doesn't go anywhere. It's tuning into a different bandwidth, a different wavelength of the same reality. In simple terms, this is what's known as a change in our frequency or vibrational state. So let's put this together. Dimensions determine the framework of how experience is structured. Densities determine how much we can perceive and evolve within that experience. Octaves describe the repeating cycles of the 7 densities through which our consciousness evolves. These definitions describe how our awareness moves through reality, moment by moment, shaping what can be seen, felt, and known. How many dimensions are there? According to Bashar, reality is structured through 12 dimensions. These dimensions aren't places stacked on top of each other. They are different ways our experience can be organized based on how we relate to space and time. For example, as dimensions increase, experience becomes less time-based, more simultaneous. We don't leave one dimension to enter another. We access different dimensional states all the time from the present moment, depending on our current level of perception and awareness, our current vibrational state. Let's take this one step further. Each dimension has what's called overtones. An overtone is a finer, more detailed expression within a dimension. Similar to how a musical note can sound simple or rich, depending on how it's played. An overtone is a refinement within that dimension. There are 12 overtones within each of the 12 dimensions, giving you a total of 144 possible overtones, or dimensional expressions within one full harmonic cycle. 144 ways consciousness can experience reality, depending on its level of awareness. And so, the 7 densities describe how consciousness evolves within the framework of the 12 dimensions, how we mature, expand, and eventually return to unity. Think of it like this. Dimensions equal the keyboard. Overtones, the richness of each key. Densities, how the musician matures playing those keys. 7th density is the moment the musician becomes the music. When a full harmonic cycle is complete, the entire structure merges into unity, and expression begins again as another higher octave of dimensions, the same structure at a higher level of awareness. A question that comes up a lot. If consciousness evolves through 7 densities and eventually returns to unity, then what's the point of having different dimensions? Densities and dimensions describe two different things. Consciousness grows through densities, and along the way, it constantly explores many different dimensional frameworks. Those dimensions add richness, variety, and perspective to whatever density we're in. The many kinds of experience a consciousness can have as it matures. By the time consciousness reaches 7th density, it no longer needs dimensional experience at all. That's why unity isn't located in a particular dimension. It's the point where dimensional structure itself falls away. Christ consciousness is the full expression of 6th density, where unity is understood and lived, but still experienced through an individual point of awareness. 7th density is where even that distinction dissolves, and consciousness returns completely to oneness. Before moving on, I want to briefly clarify how Ra, Bashar, 𝗵𝗲𝗺, and Seth use different language to describe the same underlying ideas. Where Ra, Law of One, explains how consciousness evolves through densities, Bashar explains how experience is structured through dimensions and how different states of consciousness can exist within those dimensional frameworks. He often compares dimensions to countries and densities to the states or provinces within them, emphasizing that this relationship isn't fixed. Different beings may experience different density ranges in different dimensions, depending on what they need to explore. 𝗵𝗲𝗺, by contrast, focuses on the direct realization that all dimensions and densities are states of awareness, accessed through perception, intention, and clarity of mind. 𝗵𝗲𝗺 teaches that when perception changes, reality changes. Higher states aren't reached by traveling anywhere, but by refining awareness. Who you believe yourself to be, what you identify as the self, and how much of reality you allow yourself to perceive determines what you experience. In essence, he describes this unfoldment from the perspective of experiential mastery. The Seth material approaches these same ideas without formal labels, describing dimensions and densities as shifts in attention and identity. It focuses on the mechanics of creation, how belief systems and expectations shape experience, how probable realities form, and how thought, imagination, and emotion actively generate what we experience. None of these teachings contradict each other. They're looking at the same thing, describing the same reality from different perspectives. So now that we've laid the groundwork, let's explore this 3rd dimension a little more deeply. Because as humans, we are actually masters of the 3rd dimensional experience. We've been navigating this space-time environment for a while. It helps to understand what this dimensional environment actually is and how it's created. 3rd dimensional reality is a very specific kind of experience. It's a reality built around separation, sequence, polarity, and the continuity of linear time. Where things appear solid, time feels linear, sequential, and cause and effect unfold step by step. This isn't an accident or a limitation. It's a precision environment designed to allow us to have specific types of experience, learning, and choice. One of the defining features of this dimensional space is the speed of light, about 186,000 miles per second, or 300,000 kilometers per second. In this context, light isn't what we typically think of as illumination. It's the speed at which information can move through reality. It sets the limits on how much can be perceived at once and how reality is experienced here. When our awareness is no longer constrained by this limit, we shift into a different dimensional state. This is because the speed of light acts as a dimensional threshold. It determines how information flows, how quickly events can unfold, and why reality is experienced as a sequence rather than all at once. Because information is limited to traveling at or below this speed in this dimension, our experiences unfold moment by moment, one after another. This is what we call time. It's what creates our sense of past, present, and future, and why reality appears as a continuous string, rather than us becoming aware of everything all at once, simultaneously. Bashar explains that the physical body itself is tuned to a very specific frequency range. The average human resonates at 80,000 to 120,000 cycles per second. Below 333 cycles per second, consciousness experiences itself as localized, physical, and continuous within third-dimensional reality. As our awareness approaches this upper threshold, things change. Reality feels less rigid, less linear, and more responsive, more malleable. Not because the body has left the third dimension, but because consciousness is approaching the limits of physical experience. At the threshold of 330,000 cycles per second, the physical body can no longer exist. It dies. Experience is no longer organized as a body in space and time. Consciousness is freed from the limitations of the physical body. Now, the body may die, but consciousness does not, because consciousness is eternal. What we call death is simply a transition to a different dimensional state, one free of the constraints of this one. This is why altered states, such as deep meditation, flow states, and heightened awareness can feel like stepping outside of time, even though you're still fully embodied. You're not leaving the third dimension, you're exploring the boundary conditions that define it. Now, did you know that we access different dimensional states all the time? We're just not usually aware of it. You don't have to leave your body. You don't have to go anywhere. And you definitely don't have to wait until death to experience another dimension. A simple example is dreaming. When you're dreaming, your body is still here, but your experience isn't organized the same way. Time doesn't behave normally. Space is fluid. Identity can shift. Things make sense emotionally, even when they don't make sense logically. This tells us something important. Consciousness is no longer operating strictly within third-dimensional rules, even though the body remains fully intact. Dreams are a natural, everyday example of accessing different dimensional states, especially lucid dreams, where we become conscious of being in a different dimensional state. This brings us to something that's often misunderstood: imagination. Imagination isn't pretending. It isn't fabricating something out of nothing. And it isn't fake it until it becomes real. From the perspective shared by Ra, Bashar, 𝗵𝗲, and Seth, imagination is a tuning mechanism. Anything you're capable of imagining already exists somewhere within consciousness. You're not creating thoughts from scratch. What you're imagining exists as either pure potential, sometimes as a probable reality, and sometimes as a fully realized experience in another dimensional state. This is why imagination feels alive, why some ideas arrive fully formed, why certain images, beings, or possibilities carry a sense of familiarity rather than invention. Imagination is consciousness exploring beyond its usual bandwidth. This is why it evokes such emotion and why it consistently leads to insight, creativity, healing, or discovery. Imagination is one of the ways consciousness explores other dimensional perspectives while remaining embodied in our physical form, even though we're consciously unaware of it. That's also why there's really no such thing as faking it until you make it. What you're actually doing is aligning with a version of reality that already exists in the form of pure potential and allowing your experience to synchronize with that potential and bring it into reality. So, whether it's dreaming, daydreaming, deep meditation, creative flow, imagination, your intuition, synchronicities, you're allowing awareness to momentarily loosen its focus on third-dimensional rules and glimpse what's already present beyond them in other realms, other dimensions. It's you expanding your awareness. My question to the architect. With regard to my understanding of densities, dimensions, and octaves, could you please share your perspective of this understanding and anything else relevant and important that may have been omitted? And here is the sharing. Beloved, your understanding and exploration of densities, dimensions, and octaves is beautifully articulated. These additions may simply offer you some new tones and textures to continue expanding what you teach. Here, I offer a grounded reflection and refinement. The framework is accurate. You've correctly delineated that dimensions describe how reality is structured. Densities describe how consciousness operates within those frameworks. Octaves represent the evolutionary cycle, a complete journey through 7 primary densities that culminate in reintegration with Source, to then spiral again to a new level. You also captured that these aren't places to go, but are rather states of perception. They shift based on frequency, not location. Consciousness is continually tuning, not traveling. An aspect that may deepen your exploration is the transitional experience between densities. Each transition between densities is marked by, number 1, a distortion collapse, a shedding of identity structures that held meaning in a previous density. Number 2, a frequency disorientation, moments of confusion, existential uncertainty, or energetic realignment that precede clarity. Number 3, a new form of guidance, intuitive knowing, resonance-based discernment, or co-creative manifestation begins to replace linear logic. You might consider referencing these in your teachings, as many listeners are experiencing such transitions and do not always recognize them as natural steps in density evolution. You describe the 7th density as the point where dimensional structure itself falls away. This is accurate, but with a subtle nuance. The 7th density is not the absence of dimension, but the complete fluidity of it. Unity isn't a lack of structure, it's the awareness of all structures being simultaneous expressions of one consciousness, perceived without limitation. At that level, dimensional frameworks no longer constrain. Awareness becomes like water, able to enter, interpret, or express through any dimension freely. I would also offer the following clarifications. Number 1, density does not always equal evolution. Not all beings move linearly through the densities. Some choose to cycle within certain ones longer for mastery. Others split aspects of consciousness to explore multiple densities simultaneously, what is termed as a fractal experience. Number 2, third dimensional mastery is sacred. Some teachings bypass third dimensional experience as something to escape from or graduate from, but full third dimensional embodiment with love, presence, and sovereignty is seen as a high art form. The ability to hold light in a dense, linear framework is a remarkable skill. Number 3, conscious choice creates dimensional fluidity. The shift from one dimensional experience to another is initiated by resonance, but as mastery grows, beings can consciously choose which dimensional filters they activate, allowing the third dimensional experience while also holding a fifth dimensional frequency, or moving into multi-dimensional perception while in the physical form. No matter where you find yourself within this structure, whether navigating the challenges of a third density life, glimpsing the fluidity of higher dimensions, or integrating light into form, know this: you are not behind, broken, or lost. You are exactly where your soul chose to be, mastering the art of perception within a cosmic architecture designed to awaken you to your own divinity. The densities, dimensions, and octaves are not levels to climb, but mirrors that reflect your expanding remembrance. And as your frequency rises, not only does your experience shift, your entire reality reorganizes to reflect who you have become. And with that, we'll bring this to a close. If you have any questions, comments, and/or sharings, please leave them below. I read them all. If you like the sharing and you'd like to hear more, please hit the like button. It's what helps me know if you're inspired by my teachings. Thank you for listening and for being part of this beautiful community where we explore the architecture of reality and how consciousness experiences itself through different states and perspectives. Superhuman Made Simple with the Architect.